Hello friends, I'm Siddhi Bangard, your mentor, educator, live with UPSC CSE in English with Unacademy. So let's crack it. Going forward, most of you already know me by now. Graduate from PIB Mesra, former civil services aspirant and Excel graduate. 3 years into teaching and here again to take you through the news analysis for today. Okay, folks. One more important thing that I've already launched my with an academy. So let's crack it. I've launched my science and technology course on 200 core topics of science and technology for UPSC CSE 2020. The third lecture on defense technology will be going live on 31st May 2020. The second lecture was today itself between 3 to 4:30. So I hope you make the most out of it. We'll be covering all the relevant topics in science and technology for the entire year between May 19 to May 2020. The first lecture is free, so go and check out that lecture. Then second lecture onwards, it's a paid course on Unacademy. So you can use my code Siddhi Bangard on Unacademy Plus to get a 10% off. For 1 year, your cost will only be 36,000, and for 2 years, it will be 43,200 if you use my code. This is the link for that class. Please go and check out my pedagogy if you like it. Please enroll in the course. It will be very helpful for your science and technology preparation. Going further, okay, folks, I'll also keep checking the live chat to see if you have any doubts. In case there are any doubts, please let me know on the live chat. I'll address your queries ASAP. Finally, this is what you get with an Unacademy membership. You get daily live classes, as I just took one now, between 3 to 4:30 on biotechnology, live test and quizzes and notes. So just after the class, you get my notes in the PDF format. There are structured courses, and that means you will always know what I'm going to be teaching next. And finally, unlimited access. So with one subscription, you get access to the entire gamut of courses that we are running on Unacademy. Going further, these are some of these snapshots from my first class wherein I discuss famous Indian scientists and their work. So you can see the class is very interactive and live. Everybody can post on their comments and actually go ahead asking me any doubts they have. And you can also download my notes from here. And this was, I was answering a query by one of the fellow. So this is one of the videos that shows the query there. Finally, let's come to the fee part. As I already told you, it's just rupees 40,000 for 12 months. And if you use my code, additional discount of 10%, you get it only for 36,000. And I would prefer that you take a 2-year course because the entire preparation for civil services, it will take you 1 year to prepare and another year to actually give the exam. So it will be really, really helpful. We already have a 75% off running here. And if you use my code Siddhi Bangard on Academy Plus, you get an additional 10% discount, which makes it 43,200 only. So just by paying rupees 8,000 more, you have the access to our courses for an entire 2-year duration. Okay, folks, going to our today's news analysis. So may I know that you have any important thing that you wanted to ask in the newspaper or anything that you want to know? You can comment on the live chat. So today we'll discuss the top 5 headlines. Then we'll discuss the editorial, the monetization question. It's a beautifully written editorial by a former RBI Governor D. Subbarao. Then I'll be discussing that right now the government just announced that Arogya Setu will be made open source. What does open source mean? And then second, we'll be discussing some news from the business segment that's about an interview with our chief economic advisor on the uncertainty of the growth and the growth graphs that we can discuss. Going further, the top 5 headlines for today are: so finally, America has decided to intervene again in our matters. They actually told China that we can actually intervene between you and India, just like they have been asking us that they want to intervene between us and Pakistan on the boundary issues. But we have politely asked, not just us, but even China has politely asked America to stay away from our boundary issues. Okay. Second is again a boundary issue. So The Nepal government was very hasteful in actually taking out a map on the new ground realities, or what it wants to say is that Lipu Lake Pass actually belongs to them, Kalapani belongs to them, so it wanted to show it in a new map, but they have deferred it right now. And according to Indian spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs, they say that there is already a large debate going on in Nepal about doing that, because they don't want to spoil India-Nepal relations by going unilaterally declaring that that boundary belongs to them, even when India has been having access to that part of the boundary for a long time. So you cannot just unilaterally go and change the boundaries. And at least they would not want to do a same this thing with India, because kind of we are their big brothers in the big world, and India-Nepal relations are extremely good and extremely cordial. A lot of Nepali people come and work here. A lot of Indian people go back to Nepal and work there. Now, okay, this looks like little bit odd to read, but yes, the new guidelines for film and TV shoot have been released by the Producers Guild of India. Some of the guidelines which they have mentioned is that medical masks need to be worn by the crew all the time. Handshakes, kisses, and hugs have to be avoided between the crew, and sharing of cigarettes, so smoking is quite prevalent in Bollywood, so that has to be avoided. Crew members who are greater than 60 years, they have to be they have to not to be called to the set at least for the next 3 months, so that they're not exposed to the disease, and at least 2 meter distance should be there between each of the colleagues working on this set. Now, some of the producer guilds are saying that this is for the producers who are very rich. They also want certain other guidelines to come in, like the fee for the technicians or the actors and actresses should be reduced, so that the producers who do not produce big budget movies, they are not disadvantaged. Now, these two are important international news, which I'll discuss a little bit greater in detail. The first one is regarding Japan and European Union pushing in a lot of money for fiscal stimulus to actually have recovery from the coronavirus, post the coronavirus lockdown, or the shock that coronavirus gave to the economy. And the second is about the protests that are right now going on in Hong Kong regarding the national security legislation, which has been passed by China to curb the autonomy of Hong Kong. As all of you know that Hong Kong has, or China has, one country, two systems. So Hong Kong is actually semi-autonomous. Some of the laws do not of China do not apply in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has independent judiciary, and Hong Kong has freedom of speech, which is not so in China. So going forward, and folks, if you don't understand anything, please post it in the live chat group. I'll be able to access it from here. Okay. Again, the fiscal stimulus to Japan is kind of providing $296 billion as a supplementary budget. In addition to its already trillions of budget it provides to its economy, it has provided a close to 300 supplementary budget to give a cushion to the economy, because right now Japan's economy is undergoing a recession due to the coronavirus. The second part is it will make a combined stimulus of almost $2 trillion. That is 40% of the Japan's economy will be again invested in itself to give it a fiscal stimulus. EU has also announced, or European Union has also announced, a 750 billion euro or 826 billion US dollar package for 27 member economies. That is almost, and out of these 750 billion euros, almost 500 billion euros will actually go in the form of grants or free money. That means it will not pile up as national debt for the countries or the economies receiving the debt. The debt will be given on the basis of which economy requires is the most. So right now, Italy will give maximum amount of grants, followed by Spain. Finally, talking about the Hong Kong crisis, I already told you that US, given Hong Kong's semi-autonomous status, US does not have similar trade ties it has with Hong Kong as it has with China. With China, the trade tariffs are higher, but Hong Kong, given it received its semi-autonomous status in 1997 once the British left. So it was a treaty between the British and the China, and then Hong Kong was given a semi-autonomous status, as I just told you. So US has special trade ties with Hong Kong, which again makes it a financial and trade hub in the world. But right now the US is saying that the way you're handling the pro-democracy protest in Hong Kong, we will have to end our special ties, because now we no longer think that Hong Kong is semi-autonomous. In fact, now it's hugely dependent on you, given that you are bringing in the new national security legislation, about which I'll just talk in a few moments. So what will be the impact of China and Hong Kong? So Hong Kong's economy, if in case the US starts slapping the same tariffs on it as it does on China, it will be completely ruined. And also it will be a big setback to China, because China utilizes Hong Kong's status as a financial hub to deal with the other nations. Now, what is this whole national security legislation about? It is about amending the basic law. Now, Hong Kong is run as per a mini constitution which was formulated in 1997, which is called a basic law. As per the Article 33 of that mini constitution, Hong Kong is supposed to enact a legislation which talks about taking measures against any sedition against China. That means you have to, Hong Kong will enact a law which will prevent any sedition against China. Now, the Hong Kong people do not want to do it, because they say that our freedoms are very, have been earned after a lot of struggle. So we don't want those freedoms to go, and we don't want our constitution to be amended in any form. So right now what China is doing is it is utilizing Article 18 of the same constitution, which says that if any law is made a part of Annexure 3 of the Constitution, then it can be applied directly in Hong Kong. Then you further need not take any legislature's permission. You can just enact the law and it will be applied all across the Hong Kong. So right now, China is trying to amend the Annexure 3 of the mini constitution and adding a security legislation, which is basically an anti-sedition law, so that it is covered under the ambit of Article 18 and it can be applied directly to Hong Kong, and that's why there are so many protests. In fact, last year, to October, the 2018 and 2019 protests were also known as the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong. Going further, we'll discuss the editorial of for today, that is the monetization question. So guys, do you have any doubts up till now? I am not seeing anything on the chat. Am I audible? Do you have any doubts? If you have any doubts, please feel free to put it there. Okay. So this was a editorial about the monetization question by our former Governor of Reserve Bank of India, T. Subbarao. Now, what are the important pointers and why is this article important? So, for a while, when the economic package of 20 lakh crore was announced, people said that no, it's not 10% of GDP, it's only 1 or 2% of the GDP. The government is actually not monetizing the deficit. That means the RBI is not actually giving money to the government to meet its finances. So there's no actually money flowing out in the economy. That's what they said. Then the FM actually said a couple of days ago, which I have also mentioned in my previous news analysis, that we have kept the doors open for monetization of deficit. That means we can ask RBI to print more money and give us the money so that we can meet our expenditure, which we are unable to meet because we have not earned enough revenue this year. Now, this article discusses the viability of such kind of deficit. So in the article, what we briefly discuss is what is actually monetization of deficit, why is the RBI not doing the monetization of deficit, what is the historical basis of monetization of deficit and what are the alternatives to it, and what is the difference between open market operations and monetization of deficit. So one by one, I'll tackle all these points. First of all, our former RBI governor makes it very clear that monetization is actually not equivalent to free money from RBI. Monetization doesn't mean that RBI will just chapo the money or just print the money and give it to you. No, but it will be highly subsidized. So that's there. The second thing, from where does that subsidy comes from? It comes from the banks. You're actually weakening the banks. So the subsidy is invisible, but it's not actually a very good measure. That's what the RBI governor is trying to say. Now, the second point he makes is that this whole thing which RBI is doing right now, that is the open market operations, in which the RBI will actually go and buy the bonds of the government in the open market and thus infuse liquidity into the market, is again basically monetization of deficit. You are still printing money and then putting that money in the market so that the government can borrow from the markets. It's just a different route. But then why is it more preferred than the monetization of deficit? This route of actually open market operations where RBI goes and buys the bond of the government in the open market and thus the money reaches the government. Why is it different and why is it preferred than monetization of the deficit, which is basically directly giving the government money by printing more money? Now, The historical basis for open market operations is that pre-reform era or pre-1997, the RBI used to do just that. It used to monetize the deficit. That means it used to print additional money and give it to the government to run its business. But then they decided that we should have this reform. It's not actually good to monetize your deficit indefinitely because it might lead to hyperinflation and it might lead to the falling confidence in the economy of the investors who are investing in the Indian economy. So from then onwards, it was decided RBI will operate only in the secondary market. That means the bond market, not the primary market. And it will thus engage in OMO, that is open market operations, where it will go and either buy the bonds of the government or sell the bonds of the government, sell the bonds of the government to actually remove liquidity from the market and buy the bonds of the government to increase liquidity in the market. So basically, then open market operations actually became liquidity adjustment and not government borrowing. So OMOs actually became an instrument to support growth in the economy, to check inflation and to preserve financial stability of the economy. And it had wonderful outcomes. How? Because it shifted the control of money supply and checking of inflation to the RBI. So making that shift from fiscal policy to monetary policy. So the RBI was actually now in the driver's seat. It strengthened our central bank, and that's why it is very important. However, can we actually monetize the deficit? Yes, we can. Because the FRBM Act or the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, it actually says that you have to maintain the fiscal deficit within 3% of the budget. 3% of the GDP or 3% of the budget, sorry. So it was amended in 2017. So it does have an escape clause that government can actually go for monetization of deficit if the situation so calls for. But what our governor says is that is it worth the gain we have had so far that our central bank has become autonomous? We can control inflation and growth in money supply by RBI's monetary policy. Is it worth giving all the gain? Is the situation that dire? To which he answers no. The situation is not that dire. The bond yields are still within control. They are not at 10%. They are still 6.14% bond yield mean. If a government buys out to, if the government goes to the market and buys and borrows money, then definitely it is borrowing money from the market, so it has to pay certain interest. If that interest goes very high, then it becomes difficult for the government to borrow the money because the cost of borrowing goes very high. So this is the cost of actually borrowing. It's right now 6% of the borrowed money. So if it goes up to 10% of the borrowed money, then it's very high. So right now we are at a safe position and we can actually go forward with what we have been doing so far, that is open market operations. Again, he also says that RBI has already infused sufficient liquidity in the markets, which was up to the tune of 8 lakh crore, which our Honorable Finance Minister also mentioned in her speech, that out of that 20 lakh crore package, the 8 to 9 lakh crore package was already given by the RBI in the form of infused liquidity in the market. So, and since the bond yields have not risen or the borrowing costs have not increased for the government, that means the market is actually comfortable financing the government borrowing, is what he's trying to say. Now coming to the difference between open market operations and monetization. So in open market operation, what happens is the RBI has control over the timing and the quantity of the money it wants to put in the market. So when does it want to put the money in the market and how much money it wants to put in the market, it has total control. In monetization, it is totally at the discretion of the government that how much money has to go from the RBI and at what time the money has to go from the RBI. So what it indicates is when you start monetizing the deficit, that RBI is losing control over the monetary policy, which is not a very good indication to the external markets and which can lead to a depletion or dip in our Sensex and our international reputation. So unless government is in a very dire situation and cannot finance its borrowing from the market, then only RBI should go and do the monetization of deficit, is what is the crux of the article. Going further, what makes Arogya Setu open app source means? What do we mean by open sourcing? So the first point in this regard is that software is divided into two broad categories. One is open source and the other is closed source or proprietary software. So Google Earth, Microsoft Windows, these are all closed source or proprietary software. That means that you have to pay to actually use them, but still you cannot see their source code. You need a license to use these software, and again, you cannot make changes to their source code, or you cannot distribute the copy of their software. So in fact, most of the times when we are not buying the operating system, Windows operating system, when we are buying laptops, we are actually using a pirated version of the software, which is actually illegal, because the license cost per the actual software is huge, so people end up buying the pirated version. But then again, it's not open source, so you can. But in the open source, you won't be jailed, or you won't be penalized for using that software. Why? These software are by design, they're open source, means the code can be used, the code can be seen, the code can be modified by researchers and experts, and the code can be redistributed. Also, the loopholes can be pointed out so that it can be corrected. A very big example of open source software is the Linux system, the Linux operating system. It's completely open source software, and it's highly peer reviewed operating system around the world, and is considered to be one of the best operating systems around the world because it is highly peer reviewed. So there are very limited loopholes, and it is majorly used for used as a hacking tool, because the software itself has very limited loopholes, and it's a widely used software. And some other examples of open source software are VLC Media Player, which we use to view our movies and all, Mozilla browser, everybody is familiar with that, and WordPress, which is a blogging site. Now, why has the source code been made open source for the Arogya Setu app? Because there's a lot of hue and cry that why the government is keeping a secret. The experts should have access to this code, so that we know that our data privacy is not being compromised with. The data is going to the right place. The government is not using it for surveillance purposes. So it is in line with government's transparency and accountability policies. And thus the government made it open source. It said, yes, you can go and re-engineer the source code, tell us the vulnerabilities, fix the loopholes if any, and we can issue fresh codes based on that. But still, one important point remains. The server side code of the Arogya Setu app is still not out. That means the information which is going to the server of the Arogya. So in the app, we all give our side of information, but it has to be collected and stored somewhere. So that is the server side. But we still do not have the server side code, how the information is being collated, where is it being used, is it actually going to the real server to which it is intended to. So we don't have access to that side. So if more transparency has to come in, the server side code also has to be shared by the government. Going further, our last news for today. I don't have any PIB news today because no important development has occurred up till now, which could be actually included in this part of the segment. So we'll detail out the interview with Chief Economic Advisor on the significant uncertainty about growth in the coming time. Now, in this interview, he has answered 4 questions particularly. One is view on the economic growth post-corona, or is there a significant contraction for India coming in? U-shaped or V-shaped economic recovery for India? Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. So, in this, will the lending by banks to financial sector cause a risk for further non-performing assets? And finally, the 4th question was, so far our growth has always been consumption-led, that people consume more, and that's why there's a lot of demand for goods and services, and hence the economic engine revives up. So do we need to boost our consumption more? What are we doing there? Because in the present the stimulus package, the 20 lakh crore package, there haven't been much money that is outgoing. It's only the demand side credit requirements that have been met. No money has been actually given to people to boost the demand. So that's why this question becomes pertinent. Going further, on the first answer, he said that as of now, each economist is uncertain on how the things would pan out, because he said even in January itself, we didn't know that an epidemic of such a scale would actually come up and there'll be a global recession coming down. So even now, nobody has information on when the pandemic is going to stop, and then we can, start visualizing the growth cuts or what growth trajectories the nations will follow. Finally, he also mentions behavioral economics bias. So he says there's a behavioral economics funda going behind the anticipation of the economic growth. He says when we are in a good growth phase, behavioral economics suggests that we tend to ascertain, or we tend to believe that we'll remain in a good economic growth phase. And when there's a bad economic growth phase, we tend to believe that we'll remain in that bad economic growth phase. So there's a bias there also. So we cannot really predict right now what kind of economic contraction or expansion our country is going to witness. The second point was, he talked about a V-shaped economic recovery for India. He said that during the Spanish flu, which occurred somewhere in the 14th century, when there were not so many medicines and people were actually badly impacted, that means 10% of the world population was impacted by that Spanish flu, and there was a 10% mortality rate. So compared to that, now only 1% population is infected and there's only a 3.5% mortality rate. And even then, when the Spanish flu got over, there was a V-shaped recovery. I'll tell you about what are the different shapes of recovery. So a V-shaped recovery, this is a timeline against a time and growth. A V-shaped graph looks like this. A U-shaped graph looks like this. W shape like this, and L shape like this. Now you'll tell me that this is something you already know. I'll tell you the difference here. The difference here is, in a V-shaped graph, there is a quick dip in economic activity like we had during coronavirus. Alright. This here is L-shaped. Okay. So during corona, we had a sharp dip. But just as this disease actually stops, or this pandemic is actually controlled, we'll have a sharp rise in the economic activities or growth activities, and hence a V-shaped curve. It is considered to be best case scenarios for growth. Similarly, in a U-shaped graph, it is this. That means there will be a sharp dip due to certain external circumstances or internal circumstances in the economic growth, and the stagnation will be there for some time. That means the economy will take some time to recover, and then there will be a steep increase again. A W-shaped graph is also called a double dip recession. Okay, something what we figured out in the 2008 crisis. This was the Spanish flu. This was the L-shaped. Now here, in a W-shaped or double dip recession, we first have the growth rate comes down dramatically. Then it rises for a very small amount of time. So what happens? Investors feel, okay, then economy is going up. They start investing in the share market. But then suddenly the economy dips back again, because that was a temporary up observed in the economy. And a lot of investors actually end up losing their money. So, and then there is a second dip. But then there is a permanent recovery. So it's a double dip recession. It was observed mostly during the 2008 crisis, when just after the 2008 crisis, it was actually envisaged that we'll come out with this recession, but actually it didn't happen. There was an economic recession which happened just after that, and then finally the economy was able to recover. All right. Last is the L-shaped curve. So in this, there's a huge dip in the economy due to certain circumstances, say like corona, and the economy does not come back to its usual shape for quite some time, and we do not know when we'll see the next growth spurt, which has been for India since the economic crisis of 2008. All right. The W dip was also seen in the 1930s Great Depression. Okay, coming back to our topic, he says that for India, since even from Spanish flu, the world recovered with a V-shaped graph. Okay, now this is a small pandemic which is not impacting so many people, and the mortality rate is also low. So the best case for us could be a V-shaped recovery again and not a U-shaped one. That's what he's suggesting. And since he's the chief economic advisor, let's take his words with a pinch of salt. Finally, on the third part, he said that will the banks be ready to lend? He said yes, the banks will be more than ready to lend to the people, because for banks, it is basically a risk-free loan. So you need not make any provision for it that they might go sour, because the government is giving 100% guarantee on MSME loans. The government in its first tranche of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan said they will provide 3 lakh crore of automatic loan, okay, to the MSMEs. Now, it's a risk-free loan, so he says that the banks will actually find it better to actually lend to the MSMEs rather than keeping the money parked keeping the money parked with the RBI for a interest rate as low as 3.5%. So there's no point. If you can earn higher interest rates by giving the money to the MSMEs, the banks would rather prefer to do that. So it will revive the economy. The last point that he mentions is about consumption-led growth. He says that since he was asked that there has been no consumption-led reforms that have been done, or consumption-led money has been infused in the system, he said we have addressed this problem from the supplier side. We will be providing credit to the MSMEs. So why MSMEs only? Because they employ almost 40% of our population. All right, and they produce almost 30% of our GDP. So they are huge employment powerhouses. So what we have done is we are providing support to the employer directly. So when we have provided support to the MSMEs, they will be able to meet their own commitments of producing, and hence they will be able to keep the job cuts at bay. They will not be removing people. There won't be any job cuts, and hence if there won't be any unemployment, the people will still have the purchasing power capability to go out and buy, and hence we will take care of the demand. So what are we doing here? The small cycle is this: loans to MSME, fulfill their commitments, leading to no job cuts. No job cuts lead to better purchasing power, leading to better demand, and hence to better consumption, hence boosting our economy. All right. So this is where I end my session for today, folks. This was the last news item for today. These are the questions that he answered. They were very important insights which we discussed. So this is my Telegram group link for current affairs. It is better that you join this group because I post all my upcoming videos and my upcoming classes on this group, and also the top 5 news items of the day. And you can interact with me directly here. This is again my Telegram broadcasting channel. You can join me here so that you have news about important items of news, upcoming videos, and sessions by me. And finally, you can interact with me for your doubts. Alright, folks. Going further, if you liked my video, please hit the bell icon for notifications from Let's Crack UPSC CSE. Please subscribe to our channel Let's Crack UPSC CSE for more wonderful videos from Unacademy. And in case you happen to join my Science and Technology course on Unacademy, please use the code Siddhi Bangard on Unacademy plus SBUS, and you get an instant 10% discount on your yearly membership, making it just 36,000 rupees, and on your 2-year membership, making it just 43,200 rupees. Thus, The subscription becomes very, very cheap if you use my code Siddhi Bangard on Unacademy Plus. Thank you, folks. That's all for today. I will once again check my chat if there are any doubts that are there from your end. Would be more than happy to address. So, any doubt, folks? All clear to everyone? Okay. So, folks, I don't see any queries here. So, I'll close the session now. Thank you for watching. Good day, take care, and good evening.